Folks, all of our AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, GenAI and Agentic boot camps are conducted by Agile Fever. So Agile Fever is an ISO certified, globally trusted leader in workforce upskilling, be it corporates or be it individuals. We've been in the market for last 5 years and upskilled over 10,000 people and at least 100 teams corporate across the globe. So right now, as part of our AIML bootcamps, we are conducting this free knowledge sessions, what we call them as a master class. If you're someone who is pursuing your or planning to pursue your AIML course, AIML journey, so we have fantastic end-to-end boot camps that will help you land your job in either of these roles, or if you are already in any of these roles, we have role-specific courses for all of you. So GenAI for prompt engineering for business leaders, scrum masters, project managers, product owners, developers, front-end and back-end, and for DevOps. So we curate AI based curriculum for every role-based curriculum. So if you are interested, you can look out this after the class. That's all I wanted to take time. Simran, thank you all for your patience, and we will go ahead and get started with the session. Welcome, Simran. Thank you for being with us today, and glad you accepted our invite to speak at this event. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sharath, for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Hope you all are doing well. This is me, Simran. I'll be presenting my screen and then let's get started. That's okay. So without any further ado, let's get started. As you all know that today's session is going to be on AI product architecture for effective Gen AI systems. It's quite an interesting and a really important topic which sets apart how Gen AI systems are going to be a success today, right? This is how you can actually build successful AI products, and this is going to be a differentiating factor from failed experiments or even POCs. So today's journey, what we're going to do today is these 4 pillars we're going to discuss, dive deep into. Firstly, understanding what is going to separate traditional architecture from an AI architecture. It's very important that we try building AI systems end to end. So even when you think of various applications, various use cases that you're trying to solve with generative AI or with artificial intelligence and machine learning, be it a no code or a low code or a coding approach, right? There are certain strategies that you have to understand before choosing the right tech stack. You have to design the system. System design is very important when you're trying to build an AI product. I highly emphasize on understanding the design patterns because ultimately they are going to be the decision factor in the development process, right? These are going to be the guiding force behind how you can actually develop the features for your product. So we're going to understand the fundamental shift in how we design those intelligent systems. The core architecture layers. So there is a 6-layered architecture that we're going to dive deep into today, understanding each and every component of this, Gen AI product architecture, ranging from UX, orchestration, LLMs, data, integrations, and governance layers. Certain live demos and tools which I'd love to give you on no-code tools, as well as show you the architecture and the coding, at least the code-based structure, which is going to be very useful for you if you're someone who's really interested in developing production-ready AI/ML projects. So hands-on exploration with tools like Langflow, Diffie, Reflex, and Lovable, and proven patterns. If I'm pretty sure you would have come across terms like RAG, agents, hybrid approaches, and what are certain implementation strategies you'll have to consider when you're actually looking forward to building a successful AI product or an MVP, a minimum viable product. So even by Oracle survey, it's known that 64% of the executives say strong architecture is critical to AI success. I hope everyone agrees with this, right? Ultimately, it's not the model that we are only going to think of. It's also the success of the entire product will depend on how well you have architected the system, right? So how many of you agree with this? When you're actually looking forward to building a AI product, it's the end-to-end architecture that you'll have to look forward to, right? You'll have to orchestrate the process right from UX, data layer, processing layer, so on. So Architecture is the blueprint of intelligence, and it is going to define how AI systems collect information, process decisions, and interact with users and other systems. Right? So it's not just like a single large language model, you give a prompt to it and then you call it a product. Ultimately, there is a lot of engineering which goes behind the scenes. And in order to, I would say, quickly prototype the application, of your product, you want to quickly validate your idea, there are certain frameworks, certain tools which are very prevalent today. I'm going to also show you what they are, and also we'll dive deep into certain demos which could be helpful. There is a data layer which is all about the collection, storage, management of the data. We all know that data is the key. It is ultimately going to be the context which you're providing to the large language model, or even, let's say, a machine learning model in the traditional AI architecture. Data is key. You'll have to ensure that the data is up to date. It is very relevant, and there are no discrepancies, inconsistencies in the data. So data should be of high quality when you're thinking of building an AI product. Processing layer, which involves ML computation, reasoning engines, and model orchestration. So I know some of you are from the technical background. Those of you can easily understand terms like what is ML computation, orchestration. Those of you who are new to these terms, or probably from a different background, a non-technical background, it's basically how do you put all these different components together? How are you actually going to derive insights from your data? That is in the processing layer. And then we have an interface layer. Ultimately, who's going to be the end user for your product? So your AI product is going to be used by someone, right? Your end user. You'll have to definitely keep the pain points of those end users in your mind before laying out the strategy for, or the ideation phase for defining your product, product guidelines. So I would say that the interface layer includes user experiences, the user interface, UI, UX, analytics dashboard, and most important, the APIs, which are application programming interfaces. I'll come to what they are specifically, and it's very important. Those of you who are in the technical domain would have heard of APIs. I'll help you understand and simplify this term with a very interesting example in the next slide. But this is in the interface layer, which is going to be, so APIs are basically going to be the like a connection layer between your front end, which are the end users who are going to use your application, and the backend. Backend has all your business logic and the code. All the code, data processing, etc., happens in the backend. So API is going to establish the connection with the data, the backend, and the front end. All right. The architecture paradigm shift. Before I also delve into AI-driven architecture and why we are going to emphasize on building effective Gen AI systems, it's also very important to understand where is it that traditional product architecture is more important, right? So firstly, let us look into the features. Traditional product architecture is more deterministic, logic, and rule-based systems. Certain number of times you really don't require AI to solve your business use case, right? So it all depends on firstly understanding the problem. Depending on the problem statement at hand, you take a call whether you'll have to go with either traditional or AI driven. But then there is a paradigm shift. There has been a paradigm shift in the recent decades, and in today's world as well. We know that most of the tasks and projects are moving towards the AI driven architecture. So firstly, I believe that the reason why we're going with AI driven architecture, it's more context aware. We know that data is the key, and context engineering is becoming really very important, right? As we progress and start building evolving AI systems, the AI systems are becoming intelligent, they are becoming more autonomous. So they're able to automate most of the tasks. They are helping us to cut down on the manual time which is taking on processing the data, doing all the mundane tasks of the day. So they are probabilistic reasoning models which are learning patterns, right? They are not rule-based systems, but they are rather probabilistic in nature. They're not quite deterministic. On the other hand, traditional product architecture is basically going to yield you predictable inputs, which are going to yield you definitely predictable outputs. But on the other hand, AI-driven architecture, like I mentioned, context-aware, adaptive responses. The reason why adaptive responses is more suitable is because think of a situation when it depends on highly on the edge cases or on differing scenarios. When you're actually deploying your product into production, as in when you're trying to make your AI product usable to the end users, There can be certain edge cases, there can be incoming data which is very different from what the model has seen already, and then there can be certain real time updates to the data as well, right? So that's where context is super important, and the model should be intelligent enough to understand the user's query and will be able to address the user's query, taking into account the context, reframing or rewriting the user's query, doing a query expansion. Let's say if the user's query does not make sense, these AI systems are intelligent enough to understand and then give you the right response. Right? So under the hood, there is large language models. If we specifically consider generative AI models, there is LLM, which is the brain of this Gen AI system. Traditional product architecture, static data models, and fixed workflows. But on the other hand, dynamic knowledge, like I mentioned, the data, there is a lot of trends and updates which are happening in the patterns of data. They're quite dynamic. And there is retrieval and synthesis to be done. That's where AI-driven architecture is a better fit than going with traditional product architecture. Like we, delve into further in the slides, I would be also introducing you to RAG. We would have covered a lot of sessions earlier on RAG as well. But RAG is very helpful in dynamic knowledge retrieval and synthesis scenarios. We're going to dive deep, and I'll give you a context of what it is as well. Linear scaling with infrastructure in case of traditional, but in AI-driven architecture, it is compute intensive. That's one of the trade-off or a drawback, because the models that we are using are large language models. If you think of actually training them yourself or fine-tuning them on your data set, that's going to require GPU, right? Graphical processing unit, or more compute and more memory. So more resources along with token economics. Traditional product architecture, testing validates exact behavior, so it's more deterministic outcomes, but AI-driven architecture, testing evaluates quality distributions. Right? So I would say that there has been a paradigm shift, and if you consider those cases where there are varying scenarios, the data keeps updating, and certain edge cases to handle, I believe AI-driven architecture is going to be the future. It's booming, solving various use cases today, helping us in automating the various tasks. But then the very first strategy, I would keep it like you to understand that whether the use case can actually be solved by AI or not. So if you really want to actually apply AI onto your business use case, try understanding the pain points of the users first, understanding what all are the features that you like to integrate in your AI product, depending on the user's experiences, taking their feedback, chart down a MVP strategy, and then think of using tools, frameworks, which are helping you to quickly validate your idea, whether AI can do it or not. So we have various frameworks, we have different tools which help us to quickly test or validate our ideas in the initial phase. And this will be very helpful topic for AI product managers as well. Now looking into this interesting AI product architecture for successful projects. So I believe that this is going to give you a lot of insights. I know this diagram, there are different components. So let me break it down. The very top layer that you see over here are the user roles. Now there are multiple end users for your product. You'll have to understand the role or the target audience, who's going to be the end user for your product. Is it a business user, or is it an operations user, AI engineer, tester, or data scientist? Right? So these are the user roles. Even if we have, let's say, project managers, we have power users, we have regular testers, we can assign different roles to and accesses to different individuals, to different team members, let's say, and as well to the end users. So there has to be a role-based mechanism, access control mechanism in picture, which is able to authenticate the user and basically help them to get authorized and use our application, right? So having an appropriate authentication authorization system is very crucial when you actually build an end-to-end AI system. So I would highly enforce on user roles, giving the right access to the user, taking into account the authentication and the authorization principles. Then AI Store. AI Store includes components like AI tech services, use cases, AI business services, framework, success stories. This is the AI Store, which is more about the business activities, the stakeholders in your end-to-end AI project. Their task is to look into the AI Store, making the right, charting out what is the right KPIs, or the key performance indicators for your AI product to be a success. So when do you say that your AI product is a success? There has to be KPIs, there has to be key performance indicators. They can be metrics like accuracy of your model. So under the hood, it's the system, and the driving force behind that is the brain, which is the large language model. So how accurate are the results that your generative AI or the Gen AI system is actually yielding for a particular use case, right? So that is going to be the success story. And how are you measuring, or how are you assessing the performance of your AI system? That is key over here. That's about the business visibility, crowdsourcing, which is in the AI store. AI control center, which includes AI services. So all your API endpoints. So since the APIs is core part over here, I would definitely emphasize that if you're into tech and you're trying to build a effective Gen AI system, your APIs should be well documented, well designed as well. So there can be multiple features for your project, right? So think of like you are building a multi-model recommendation system, let's say. So in the case of multi-model recommendation system, where your data formats can not just be limited to text but also images, videos, audio, then you can have modalities like vision, speech, text, etc. For each of the modality or the data format, we could have a API service. So we can have vision processing, speech processing or speech translation, text generation, let's say. So all these could be the business logic, the core business logic, which is going to be implemented via APIs. So you have various functions in your code, which are going to be encapsulated and wrapped up, exposes API endpoints basically. And why are we exposing it as API endpoint? The backend needs to be connected to the front end. So just like you go to a restaurant and you have, waiters, you have concierges basically who are serving food. They are basically, I would say, the APIs which are going to connect your, your request, let's say, your order, and take it to the backend. So backend over there would be the chef who's actually doing the task of, preparing your food, food. But who's the one who's giving the order? It's you as an end user in the front end who's going to give you an order to the waiter, right? So the waiter over here is acting, is analogous to an API, which is going to connect your the request from the user, basically the request from the front end, to the server which is present in the back end. So this is a very easy analogy, I know, but this is just for those of you who are from the non-tech background, for those of you who are able to understand. So I would definitely, I would like to know if there are any questions you have so far. Feel free to drop it in the chat. I would. Okay. If there's any question that you would be having,
I'll ping you if there are any questions, Simran.
Sure. Yes.
But we can take like 5 seconds to see if anyone comes up with a question, and we can get started again.
Yeah, sure. All right.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. No questions. I think people are following through. You can keep going.
Great. Perfect. So yes, so I hope you're able to get this analogy now. It's just like a waiter who's going to take your request. So you are an end user here, the front end, and then your request is being sent to the back end. Right? The back end is where, let's say, the cook or the chef who's going to prepare your food is present in the kitchen, right, or the pantry. So the kitchen, pantry are basically all the servers, the databases which are present. Think it off like that, where you have databases are basically where all your data is stored, right? So it's an organized, I would say, organized arrangement where all your data is stored. You can have different types of databases as well. So in our case, let's say in the kitchen and the pantry could be the database and the servers. Right? So then that's the backend part. The link between the backend and front end is the API, and it's very necessary that all our code, the business logic, is getting exposed as an API endpoint. So do ensure that there are definitely certain guidelines for designing those APIs as well. I would be covering that in the later part. That's a bit technical, but I would say that this is what is the API layer. Very important layer, right? When you actually design an AI product architecture. Then you also would require an AI engineering lifecycle management layer, which is going to include tasks like data preparation, model management, AI assurance, data catalog, model repository, and feature store. So, when you're actually working on data, it's very important that you understand the features which are present in the data. You have to engineer those features. So any features are basically the columns in your data. In case of text CSV files, In case of images, features could be the color of the image, the patterns present in the image, and so on. Right? So you have to engineer those features and process the data. So that is in the AI engineering life cycle. I will put it like the AI ops, which is happening over here. The all the data science folks who have joined or data science enthusiasts would be very aware of this, the tasks which are involved in the end-to-end data science, right from data preparation, data curation, processing, feature engineering, and so on. But now that's in the traditional ML. If I were to say that if you're working on a generative AI project, then what could be the AI engineering lifecycle management? This would include an orchestration layer that's present next in the slide, but you could call this as an orchestration layer, which is going to be a mediator or a central controller, which is going to bring all your API endpoints, the prompts for the LLMs, then the the infrastructure layer, governance layer, all of them together. This is the AI engineering lifecycle, also called as the orchestration layer, which is putting all these components, sub-components together, right? And mediating or coordinating between each of the components. So hope this makes sense. This is very, I would say this is again the brain of our entire AI architecture, because ultimately the LLM, the model as well, when I say model repository, your large language model is also a part of the orchestration, right? I mean, it's a part of this AI engineering life cycle. I do see one question. I would love to hear more about authorization and authentication. How does the AI solution know who you are? Great question. I would say it's also very important to understand the user roles. So we have different frameworks for assigning roles and for implementing good authentication and authorization principles. So to name a few, there are cloud providers like AWS, Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft Azure, GCP, Google Cloud provider, Google Cloud platform. So all these are various cloud providers which have their role-based access and IAM. In case of AWS, you have something called as identity and access management. That is what is going to help you to implement this authorization, authentication principle and integrate in your AI product. You can also do it via OAuth mechanism. We have something called as a OAuth security-based mechanism. It's a little bit of security topic, networking and security topic, and cloud. So if you read about these principles, like I've mentioned IAM in case of AWS docs, you can find it in the documentation of AWS. You'll get a good understanding about how do we actually implement it with that particular cloud provider. If you're using some other frameworks as well, most of the frameworks that we have today are already implementing authorization, authentication principles. It's just that for the AI to understand and really authenticate that it's the right user which is going to sign in, how these AI systems are actually working. Let's say an example, if you've heard of Hugging Face Hub, where we have different models available, LLMs. If you've heard of something called an API key, API key is application programming interface key, right? So it's also ensuring the AI is also, so basically you are able to only access your AI model if you have an API key generated or at least a token generated. And if the token is correct that you have entered, every token, every API key that you generate is going to be unique for every user. So it's a unique API key which is generated. That's the reason we never expose these credentials, user tokens and API keys to anyone. So if you enter the API key correctly, you can access the LLM and you can chat with the LLM. You can prompt it and get the desired output. So to rightly answer your question, the AI is understanding by the API keys or your user tokens, user access tokens. Right. All right. Hope that addresses. Then that's also one key part. Then again, AI engineering lifecycle management was all about bringing all these subcomponents together. We have AI infrastructure, poly cloud management, which is going to be consisting of AI data storage. Now, there has to be one place to store all the data, right? And you need infrastructure for that. You need good amount of resources, GPU, in order to finally also think about hosting your application. You cannot just, have a Jupyter notebook, let's say, or you cannot just have all your AI product working successfully only on your system locally. There's no point, because how will you be able to deploy your AI product or make it usable for the end user? You'll have to think it from the user's perspective. So you need some deployment and hosting platform, right? Infrastructure should be there. So there are various cloud providers, like I mentioned, AWS, GCP, Azure, which definitely provide you the infrastructure in order to host and deploy your AI product application, so that you can have all your results, online. You can have all your results, your AI product as a shareable link online. So other, everyone all across the internet would be able to use your application. Is the presentation available? Yes, I believe it. I mean, it should be also shared. Post the session, I would be also sharing it to the team. Then training cluster and inference cluster, along with the, in your private or public AI cloud, you have the training as well as the inference cluster. Now, training cluster is basically, so cluster is like think it of like a server or a virtual machine, which is present on the cloud provider, and that's helping you to train the data. So that is training cluster. So you, in most of your machine learning projects, you have a training process and a prediction process, right? So you have train data where you're training your model. You require a dedicated cluster assigned to that. So you have a training cluster in case of, for the train data, your model to learn the patterns, and an inference cluster if you want to basically test the data or make predictions on the test data set. This is about the infrastructure part, and like I mentioned, you can also not just do on cloud, you can also deploy your application on edge devices. So let's say you are actually making an application and you want to host it on an edge device or a hardware device. Even that could be going under the AI infrastructure. It is compute agnostic, firstly, on demand scalable computing power. So we are actually emphasizing a lot on scalability aspect. I'll dive deep into scalability and why it is so important that, in system design space, you have to consider the scalability aspect, because it's not just going to be initially, yes, there can be only 1 or 2 users using your end product, but then ultimately you're going to scale your application, and there would be millions of users who are trying to access your application or work with it at the same time concurrently. So that's all about the scalability aspect, which is also in the AI infrastructure layer. AI control layer is also present, which is more towards the governance side of it and observability side of it. It's very important that you monitor your AI products really well, right? Because sometimes your AI models can definitely hallucinate. We have seen like models sometimes fabricating information, making up information. Right? So you need a mechanism which is going to govern the outputs, whether your large language models outputs or your ML models per se, are they, so this does not happen in ML models usually, because it's all already trained on your data set and it's quite deterministic, right? But on the other hand, if you're using LLM model, it's a pre-trained model on humongous amount of data. So there are unfortunately certain ways in which in which the end users, let's say hackers, can actually go with the prompt injection mechanism. Let's say try to tweak the prompt in such a way so that the LLM will expose certain credentials. Now that's where monitoring is super important. You need to set guardrails. You need to set AI guardrails or checks, so that not only just the performance is monitored, but also ensuring that the AI's output is not toxic. It is not going to give you harmful content, right? So ensuring that the content is abiding by the responsible AI principles, which are, we need to have reliable outcomes from the AI product. We don't want outcomes which are inconsistent, or we want outcomes which are toxic in nature or delivering harmful content, right? So that all is a very crucial part of AI control layer, and I would also emphasize that as an important step that all your AI, all AI product managers should actually take into account. Okay.
Yes, sooner we can take the questions at the end. That's fine.
Sure. All right. Yes. So we do have we do have certain slides as well to cover interesting topics. So, like rightly mentioned, I can take it to the end. I would like to cover the most of the other important topics as well. So this is about the AI control center, and then we have, so these are all about the architecture layers, operational management, control risk. So risk assessment is also a part of AI control center. It's towards also you have prompts which you are actually passing to the large language model. There are various prompt templates. How do you actually version those prompts? How can you compare the outputs of your AI models and the evaluation phase? It's very important that you evaluate the outcomes of your large language models. Now, definitely your end users are the ones who are going to give you feedback. That's fine. Real-time feedback, you can get it from business users, you can get it from AI engineers, or if your end user is, let's say, if your end user is a financial guide or a financial financial savvy person, then yes, you can have the various end users. But on the other hand, taking their feedback is a real-time feedback, which is super important. That is human in the loop. But there has to be an apart from human in the loop or a human based evaluation, where you are yourself as a human evaluating the outcome of the AI product in terms of all these metrics. There has to be certain systematic ways in which, or the KPIs, which you'll have to, already chart out to evaluate these products, right? So there can be accuracy, it can be relevance. How relevant is the content or the AI's outcome? Is it actually pertaining to the user's query? So the relevance, precision, all these can be the KPIs, the time it is taking, the latency, or how much, because sometimes if you're, what is the use of a AI product which is giving you like, let's say 5 minutes, which is making the user to deliver a response. If the user is not happy, if the experience at the user's end is not happy waiting for 5 minutes, then you definitely have to think of optimizing this. You'll have to think of reducing the latency factor or the time which is taken by the LLM to, or the entire GenAI pipeline to deliver a response. I hope this was clear, and this actually presented a lot of insights, I believe. I know there were multiple subcomponents that you might have delved into and already had a couple of questions on the user role, vision, etc., etc. So we'll be delving more into depth, and there are more diagrams to be discussed. So I'll be taking any questions at the end. Right? So the 6 layers, now looking at this diagram, we can jot it down and now also go dive deeper, are UX layer, orchestration layer, LLM core, data layer, integrations, and governance layer. Now, UX layer is the front end layer. Put in simple words, it's where you're getting the user's input, right? The user will be prompting something. They, like in case of a end-to-end recommendation system, like I've given one example of multi-model recommendation system. So the user's query could be a text, it could be some question related to a particular product, or if he's looking for a particular product, he wants certain suggestions in order to basically suggestions in order to buy certain similar products, or ideas on how to use that product in his workspace, right? Those can be various scenarios. Now UX layer is where it's your application trying to interact with the user. It's the entry point for your user towards the application, right? That is the UX layer. So all your design aspects, how the look and feel of your AI product should be, that is in the UX layer. Orchestration layer is your context management, the central brain or the controller for your AI product, which is going to coordinate between your LLMs, data layer, governance, integrations, and UX layer. So all these components are basically getting coordinated by the orchestration layer. If you might be wondering what is that framework which you might be using in orchestration, now in no-code tools, we already have that orchestration studio, which is present. We're going to look into that. But in case of technical products, someone who's into the coding space, certain orchestration products in the GenAI space, if you've heard of, are LangChain, LangGraph, AutoGen. These are certain very excellent orchestration frameworks which help you to build multi-agent systems also. Nowadays, we have agentic AI in the picture, a very core topic of GenAI. Or you could even think of, not if you're not using agentic AI yet, you could even have MCPs, you could have LLMs, etc. So bringing all this together, making your LLM interact with the routing logic, with the prompts, chaining all those prompts together is happening in the orchestration layer. LangChain is one excellent example of orchestration framework. LLM core. Now, LLM core is where your underlying LLM. Are you using OpenAI GPT model, or are you using Claude, or are you using Mixtral or Llama? So the underlying foundational model you're using is in the LLM core. Data layer basically involves everything around the data, the ETL processes like extract, transform, load, processing the data, your database, the knowledge base, basically, the various data formats. Now, the data can be in CSVs for you, or the data can be in images, in audio, video, etc. All that lies in the data layer, and there has to be some strategy to process that data. Are you going to convert that data into embeddings? Now, we know in GenAI, if you've heard of embeddings, they are basically numerical representation, vector representation for your LLM to understand, right? So there has to be an embedding layer, which is basically going to take your data and convert it into a suitable format, which is meaningful for your large language model to process. So that is happening in the data layer. And you're going to store all those embeddings in a vector DB, into a vector database, right? So there are various vector databases as well. So just to name a few, there are ChromaDB, There is Facebook AI similarity search. You have Pinecone, Weaviate, etc. Right? And the traditional databases, not the vector DB specifically, but then the databases like SQL and NoSQL, if you've heard of. Then there is MySQL as a database you could use. There is PostgreSQL, MongoDB which is excellent for unstructured, semi-structured data. Right? Integrations. Now in integrations, we have external APIs, we have tool calling, functional execution, and system interconnections. So all these lie in the integrations layer, which help your LLM to basically connect to external resources and tools. Governance, where you're setting the guardrails. I guess while I was mentioning the architecture, I did emphasize why governance is important, why you need to track cost, tokens used by the LLM model, and how do you actually look into the observability aspect. Right? So these are the 6 layers of the AI product architecture. Please do feel free to take a screenshot of this slide as well. This would be very helpful if you are as an AI product manager or a developer even thinking of building an application for solving a use case. Then these are the various 6 layers that you have to decompose your solution into. There's another visual diagram which is making it clear. So this is, just for a reference purpose, which I have put it in the slides, where just what now I have mentioned all the other layers, like the UI UX layer, prompt layer, etc. And if you're going with the Gen AI, you can go think of using RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So let's say you have unstructured data as well as data which is present in the form of PDFs, tables, CSV files. You have it stored in a vector DB as well as certain databases like GraphDB or SQL. Now you need a mechanism which is basically, where the user is asking a question, the user's query is embedded, has gone to the LLM. Now the LLM should also be able to get the information from this vector DB, right? So there has to be some retrieval done, or there has to be some data extraction done. So if you think of it like you have a huge database, like let's say you are going to Google search, you type a particular query of yours, you see multiple, like let's say you have typed a particular book name, you see multiple sites basically selling that book, some information about the book and so on. Now why is it that among all the various books only these have been returned? It's similar to the search engine where there are multiple chunks present in your database, and then out of all the chunks, or out of all the I would say data points, basically the most relevant data chunk is returned. The most relevant one, as in the one which is most similar to the user's query, something which is going to be relevant to the user, right? Answering the user's question directly. That is what is going to be returned. So if you can think of returning additional data. Now why do we exactly need additional data? Because these databases are going to contain information, like I mentioned, CSVs, PDFs, etc., which are very contextual in nature. They will be helping the large language model to generate some useful information correctly. So you are basically augmenting or increasing the capacity of the large language model by making it not hallucinate. That's why RAG is an excellent mechanism if you want to mitigate hallucinations. If you see your LLM making up information, it's giving you very generic, vague responses which are out of context, not answering to your query. You can actually, I would say, have a vector DB in place and then have a retrieval mechanism, specifically RAG into picture, which is giving additional data, up-to-date data rather, real-time data to your large language model. Right? Then for the serving part, now let's say the data, the relevant chunks from this vector DB has been given to the LLM. The LLM has to finally generate the outcome, right? Now the generation of the summary, the outcome is going to happen by the serving process. Now that is where we've discussed about the LLM core in the layer, LLM core or the business logic, where you have an API for the generation purpose. So LLMs are all generative AI models. We know that GPT itself stands for generative pre-trained transformer. Right? So all these LLMs are generative in nature. That's why they do a very good job where you require creativity in tasks. And even if you require reasoning from an LLM, you can actually do that with the right context engineering ways, or giving it the right context, right prompting strategy in picture. Right? So yes, so you have an orchestrator as well. Like you can use LangChain, LangGraph, etc., which is going to put in all these various layers together. And then you can think it of like a multi-agent system where you have an evaluation set, observability layer set, and so on. So bringing all of what we have discussed so far into a more specific pictures for RAG, right? If you want to actually implement, let's say, a chatbot, which is helping the users to chat with their data, all their data like PDF files, Excels, etc., present in a vector DB, and we want to basically be able to interact with those PDFs or those documents. There has to be some mechanism to do that, and which is RAG. Right? If you want to do with agentic approach, you can have a multi-agent system in picture, which is going to have RAG as one of the components. So you can think it of like an agentic RAG as well. Right? So, but the whole idea is not to dive deeper. Definitely, we'll be having upcoming sessions. I'd love to deliver, which is going to deep into the nitty-gritties of each. But then, since the session is towards you to understand how do you actually design a good AI product at the end of the day, so actually to build a effective Gen AI system. So we are going to take all these as components, sub-components in this AI product of ours. Right. So you have an orchestration in MLOps as well. You need infrastructure, right? You need monitoring to be done. You require optimization by the model. Detect, is there any drift in the data? Is there any drift in the features? All that is happening in the MLOps cycle, right? MLOps life cycle. So dedicated teams are present. If you think of building an end-to-end product in the industry, we have dedicated, I would say, team members who are working on tasks like UX, prompt, LLM orchestration. So LLM orchestration is more towards the Gen AI, but you have in tandem with the Gen AI team, you have DevOps team taking care of the infrastructure, right? How do you actually establish good pipelines ultimately to monitor drift in the data? How do you actually host your application or deploy your application into production environment? Okay. Then this is what we have seen. If you're thinking of actually going with core architecture, so while I was actually explaining you each of the layers, I did mention certain frameworks, right? So all these frameworks are just, I've mentioned it over here. Like if you're going with building a backend service, you can think of using Fast API, Flask, Node. Those of you who have the tech background will be able to already correlate with these terms. Those of you who are new buyers or probably new with these terms, they are just various tech frames that you can use for your or developing your backend service layer. I'm also going to show you certain tools like no code, which you don't have to worry about all these frameworks, because you just have to via natural language, you just have to enter a prompt, and then via your prompt, the tool basically would be helping you to build a end-to-end application, a web application, which will help you to build an MVP, let's say, right? So all these frameworks like LangChain, LangGraph, or orchestration layer, model layer are all your LLM models. Basically, data and context layer includes your databases and the embedding model. Your embedding model to use your APIs, logs come in the data and the context layer as well. Governance and observability, you have frameworks again like LangFuse being one helpful one, which helps you to keep a track of how many tokens are being consumed by the Gen AI system. We know that all these LLM models, like even if you go with ChatGPT, Claude, etc., are working on tokens, right? So token is like you can think it of like 3/4 of a word, let's say, right? It's essentially 3/4 of a word. So how many words are basically being processed by the LLM in the output input? All that has to be tracked, because if you are using more tokens than in your plan, in your free tier or your plan, then it would definitely exceed and you would be getting errors then, right? Sometimes you encounter rate limiting error. Sometimes you get token exhausted error, and so on. So observability is very important. And Trace Loop, Prometheus are also certain frameworks which help you to keep a track of, basically how are the outcomes. It's more helpful for debugging purposes. If something fails or goes wrong, you can actually look into the logs. So they are more for the logging mechanism. Now, coming to the UX layer specifically, I would say that if you're designing a UX layer for your AI product, think about conversational design principles, multi-modal input handling. So whether your AI product, is it actually supporting text, images, audio, video, or is it just text that you are looking for from the user's end? There has to be transparency and explainability in the the output which is returned and shown back to the UI. So it's not just that you think it of like an input, but also understand that finally, like in the case of restaurant example as well, like you are ordered your favorite dish, and then your the waiter has basically taken your order, and then the cook has processed that food, prepared the food, and then waiter comes back and delivers the order to you back, right? So it's ultimately you who are also receiving at the receiving end. I would say that the input has to be understood, that what is the right input handling mechanism. There has to be no, I would say, mismatch in the expected data type in the input itself. And not just that, but also ensure that the final output which is getting returned to the UI is also helping the end user to trust the AI's decision. Ultimately, trust is super important when you're actually building an AI product. You need to garner trust. So that's why transparency and explainability. Your AI outputs should be quite explainable and transparent, so that can be implemented. Certain tips from my experience are that you could show confidence scores. So LLMs, if they're not too confident about giving a particular answer, they can have a low confidence score, right? So with that, it would also enhance more transparency in the way they are actually processing. And sources, if there are, like if you have mentioned citations, right, there are various tools out there which you ask a question, and then you see that they actually, even ChatGPT, let's say, that's the most prominent one, that it also cites us various sources, right, from its answers. So citation is basically helping us to understand that from which particular data source has the LLM generated that answer. That is also an important aspect, and also enriching our end. We are end users, so it's also enriching our experience at the end. Then reasoning paths, all this is coming under transparency. Progressive disclosure, like starting simple, revealing complexity gradually. Now, most of the developers, AI product managers tend to over engineer. I would say that start simple, prototype it, gain feedback, and then start adding new features into the product, right? Because always it's a more iterative way. Your product definitely would not stop at version 1. There are version upgrades which keep happening. So maintain a good change log, maintain a good documentation for your product, and then also start simple, iterate upon the feedback that you're receiving by the end users, right? So they also take into account the human in the loop, basically the human feedback. Orchestration layer, which is the brain. Some tips that you could actually incorporate while designing this orchestration layer are: request analysis is very important, because ultimately the input, from the input you are, the input basis which is processed from the UI end is going into the orchestration layer. Now it has to basically understand the intent of that. Whether is it supposed to be delegated to one agent, or it has to be delegated to a classification agent, or does it have to be evaluated first, or processed first? So what is the next step, basically? What is the downstream task which has to be taken place, right? So that is basically the request analysis. Understanding the entities which are present in the user's query, assembling all those information in context, routing it intelligently. Now, if you've heard of Open Router, it's a very helpful platform where you have it's like a repository where you have multiple models, right? Open Router, if you ask as a user, you ask it a question, your query is taken, and then to the most efficient large language model out there in Open Router, your query is routed, right? And the most cheaper one as well. So intelligent routing has to be done. Your ultimately your system has to be intelligent enough to route your request to the correct agent, right? Dedicate your request to the correct agent. Load balancing is also taken over here. So if there are multiple users concurrently trying to access and get an output at the same time, you need to do a load balancing. Divide or balance out the load, the server load, to the servers which are basically not, I would say, free, basically to the free resources or GPU servers. You could actually route the traffic, because if there's a lot of incoming messages, a lot of incoming traffic, you need your GenAI product needs to do a load balancing. Now, for load balancing also, we have different tech frames. So, but then this is a principle more than the tech frames, because tools, frameworks keep changing. More than that, I would like to highlight on the principle. Chain execution, where you have sequential steps, conditional logic, parallel processing taken into account. Like I've just given an example of multiple prompts at the same time, or parallel functions getting executed at the same time. So think about those scenarios. Response synthesis, the quality of the output from the orchestrator, which is being sent to the next layer. Then I'm going to show you, like I'm going to introduce you to Diffy, and it's also a no-code framework, basically no-code tool. You could check it out. It's an open source platform which helps you to basically orchestrate workflows, develop some agentic RAG applications, effective GenAI systems. So you don't have to really worry about the infrastructure deployment and all. It's because all of this is taken care in this no-code or a low-code platform. So if you look at it, the architecture of Diffy, even it has data set, the ETL, processing of data, storage of the data is present in relation database, vector DB as well. It has various integrations to external tools. So let's say you would also like to have a web search tool integrated into Diffie. Then we have different plugins box. Like if you want to integrate, let's say in your recommendation system, you also want a web search. You also want to integrate Notion workspace, for example. Then or WordPress as well, to finally deliver the recommendation in the form of a WordPress. So all that in the toolbox. We have Diffie LLM Ops, where we have monitoring in picture, lifecycle management, labeling of data. Likewise, when I say moderation system, it's a governance layer. This is the governance layer, logging mechanism, observability, the LLMs. You can go ahead in Diffie, you can go ahead with open source LLMs, commercial LLMs as well. Open source ones are free to use. You require API key to access them. But in Diffie, I believe that you can actually just install OpenAI as well. And then there are certain credits which are for free also access. You can check into the pricing of Diffie, but it does offer a generous tier even in the free plan, and you can build at least 5 workflows, right? 5 apps which can be hosted and deployed. So yeah, so it's a backend as a service platform. I would put Diffie is providing you with the backend services, infrastructure to host, etc. So it's a backend as a service platform where you have all your APIs, app builders, etc. as well present. Right? This is the architecture of Diffie, where you have also prompts, etc. in picture. All right. Okay, since I do have certain more slides, I would like to extend a bit. If that's fine. So there are certain more slides. The idea was also to delve deeper into the coding frameworks as a practical, but definitely would be having that in the upcoming sessions. So this session is more towards, helping you to understand the principles of AI product architecture in depth, and to have that design principles in picture more than the tech frameworks. I'm going to highlight on the principles. So yeah, just than the usual, I would like to extend it a bit. And then we could, probably the resources could be shared, and you could also have them handy with you.
Or if you would like to do a second part or something is also fine.
Yes, sure, Shyam. So second part, I would also like to have it probably in the next session. The second part could be more focused on the nitty-gritties of these and the coding aspect, diving deep. Right now, we can keep it more on the fundamentals.
So is this a logical stop then?
So I would say there are a couple of more slides, still the key takeaways, and then that would be the winding.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So in the data layer architecture, so since we have already seen there are various layers so far, the data layer architecture is where you have multiple data sources, data formats. You basically have to process the data, ingest it in the right manner to the downstream task, do a proper chunking strategy, or basically split your data into chunks, because we know that if you cannot just provide the entire LLM, the entire PDF to the LLM, right? Your entire document has to be first chunked or decomposed into sections. That is in the chunking strategy. The way you are chunking, how many tokens have to be present in the in the chunk size, that is super important. Embedding and indexing, like what is the framework that you're using for generating a vector representation, or what is the model you're using for doing the embedding part, is also analyzed in this particular phase. Retrieval optimization, where you're doing the data extraction, you definitely need to ensure that there is the right context which is going to the LLM at the in the downstream task. So do ensure that there is high quality context. Hybrid search can be implemented. So hybrid search is basically a blend of your sparse and dense vectors. So sometimes you can have dense vectors, sometimes you have sparse data, right? So you can do a keyword search, at the same time you can do a semantic search based on the meaning. So that's in the retrieval optimization, more of a RAG principle. So then governance and production readiness checklist, we have, I would say, 4 principles to keep in mind, especially for the governance phase. Security and guardrails being important. Like we have to, like you've also mentioned, the role-based user access, right? So that's also an important security mechanism in picture. So it's not just the input validation. So we also have to do output filtering. The final output that we're going to send it back to the user, that has to be devoid of any harmful content. So we need to ensure certain AI guardrails are also put in place. PII detection, any personal information should not be leaked, any credentials should not be leaked, basically. Observability and monitoring, where we track latency, tokens, prompts, etc. I've spoken about this. Then cost management is how you keep a track of the cost as well, because each and every token has incurring a cost, right? Um, so so if you're unless you're using open source models, but then yes, if you're going with a paid or commercial LLM, you have to also look into the costing factor when delving into the AI product. Quality assurance being super important. How do you assess the quality of the outcomes? I would stress on human in the loop review process, because the end users are finally going to give you the output. So these are three core patterns for Gen AI. You could also, this for your reference. So I've just mentioned over here the retrieval augmented generation pattern, agent pattern. So it's up to you, your task, that what is the right pattern for your product. You'll have to ensure that is it really that an agent will help there, right? So you can have multi-step workflows, more adaptive context. That's where, in order to make it more autonomous system that you're trying to build for solving a complex task, think about an agent pattern. But if your task is not too complex, the idea is that you have certain data documents and you want to chat with them. Let's say a co-pilot or a chatbot that you're trying to build. You can go with RAG pattern. A hybrid would be combining traditional ML and Gen AI. Now, not to say that we are ruling out traditional ML. If you would like to also have certain components in your entire data, into your entire project, which is having an ML, traditional ML pipeline or business logic in picture, you can actually blend the strengths of each traditional ML and Gen AI, which is going to give you very deterministic decisions for predictions, as well as creativity and flexibility in use cases based on your task. Right? This is a hybrid pattern, and it's also best for enterprise applications requiring both precision and adaptability. Then how do you actually choose the right AI architecture? Understanding the business problem is super important. Now, all the product managers would be able to resonate with this, that we have to understand the requirement first, right? Be the client requirement, or if you're actually designing for an end user, understand the pain points of the end user, and then start with the outcomes. Like, what is it that your product is trying to solve? Right? And more than what, how is it trying to solve, and is it going to actually help the end user or not? Don't just over engineer, think about making it a super complex agent. You have to ideally understand what's the business problem, what value is it that you're creating, balance scalability, flexibility, and cost, definitely. Optimize for long-term adaptability while managing operational expenses, right? So keep into account the scalability aspect, that there are multiple end users which are trying to use your application, right? So align team expertise and regulatory needs. Ultimately, it's also to be understood that you build with capabilities of your team and choose the right frameworks for your product. Architecture drives success, super important. That's the key takeaway from the session. I would say that do stress on the AI product architecture. Understand the 6-layered architecture patterns that we have seen today. The layered approach is super helpful for any product managers out there or developers trying to build applications. Have a business first mindset based on outcomes, not technology trends, because technologies keep changing. So I've just mentioned certain tools and frameworks, but at the I would say very crux of it, I would say that it's ultimately the outcome which you're trying to solve. Trying to get. Then built for scale, designed for modularity, observability, and continuous evolution. Keep your systems evolving, and not just built on static data, but then rather on real-time data information. Yeah, so I believe that this blueprint would help you to prototype with your tools. You can explore tools like Diffy, Reflex, Langflow, which was also part of the agenda for today's session. So I could probably show the tools, right now, give you an understanding. Tool links you can explore because they're super easy. You just need to enter most of them, enter a prompt and then chat with AI in order to build a web application for yourself. So these are no-code tools for those of you who are from non-tech. And then those of you who are from tech, I believe that the second part of session will be helpful, which I can have it in the next part, definitely, because that involves a little bit of understanding about technical terms. So that could be the part 2. But do understand Diffy Langflow can be taken as an orchestration framework. I can show you a quick demo. And user experience can be built with Lovable. End-to-end system integration is where you are integrating all your monitoring, data ingestion pipelines into picture. And the good part, Lovable, Diffy, all of them already have a design architecture in place. So you don't have to really worry about that. You can try building chatbots, co-pilots, content generators. So these are certain ideas that you can actually experiment with, practically no-code app ideas. With the coding as well.
We can do a no-code one also later on. specifically no code, low code.
Sure.
That will
So
also be helpful for folks.
great. So in the next session or in this session?
The next.
Okay,
We'll
perfect.
do a separate session for it, and we'll demo something that people
Correct.
can actually utilize it, no?
Exactly. So
Like
the practical part
completely,
can be taken, correct, in the next
yeah.
session. This was about the theoretical aspects that
Keeping time in mind, we're already
yes,
past, right?
correct.
So I think we have 15 folks left. Thank you so much, guys. We have a very quick survey that we're going to launch right away. We will want you to take the launch. Again, Simran, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
I
it was
think
a
it was
pleasure.
a
Yeah.
wonderful session.